Business Week, and the little bird said, that was it really. Well, I was invited in to talk about my project, Sabotage Times, which is a digital magazine. We started it last May. It kind of grew out of a project that I did with some of those guys at the back there, which was a Leeds United message board called One Mick Jones. And the more time, I started that about 8, maybe 10 years ago, and it started off with football reports, and then it kind of broadened into pretty much the sort of general discussion that guys have when they're together. And the more time I spent on that, the less time I spent working, and the more engrossed I became in One Mick Jones, the less career I had to speak of. And every now and then I would think, if this had my name on the front of it, and it had a generic title, and it didn't have a Leeds United badge, it'd probably be worth some money. It was full of great writers. Even though it was a Leeds-oriented message board, it had fans of all sorts of clubs, from Chelsea, Manchester United, Hull, Blackburn, had men and women writing on it. And it kind of got to the point where I didn't really have a proper job anymore, or any income, so I thought, right, I'm going to do that. I'm going to take some elements of One Mick Jones and put them on a branded online magazine. And sort of gulped a bit when I saw the Culture Vulture WordPress cost 70 quid, because mine cost about 17,000, and it was essentially exactly the same thing, but I got some designers to build mine rather than just doing it myself. And I've got one guy to come and work on it with me. We started, as I said, last May, just put it up there, started using Twitter and Facebook, and message boards. We went back to message boards. When we had football stories, we'd seed them on message boards with particular fans, particular clubs. And pretty soon, the quality of the content meant about 30,000 people a month were visiting the site. And then about autumn last year, I did an interview in The Guardian and said, oh, that thing that's getting quite good online is me. And that raised the profile a tiny bit. And it just kept going, really. And now we have 500,000 people visit it every month. They're unique visitors. Many of them come back at least 1.5 more times. That's ostensibly what it is. It's funny, it's well written, it has all sorts of different contributors. It's written by people from all over the world. Most of the people that write it are writing anyway. It's not like when I've been editing magazines where you ring somebody up and commission a piece. We do commission 2 or 3 pieces a day, but we put anywhere between 7 and 15 stories up a day. What I kind of realised was that there were masses and masses and masses of really good writers out there who had a passion and enthusiasm and a knowledge for their own particular subjects, or maybe were just really funny and cynical and critical of very mainstream subjects like TV shows or sports clubs or personalities or whatever. But actually, although, as many people have said tonight, there aren't any real great barriers to entry for blogging, one of the real challenge is getting people to read your blog. So we essentially go around, we find great blogs, we see what friends are tweeting, and we just write to the people and say, we've got this thing, 500,000 people read it, give us a couple of stories and we'll link back to your thing. So in that way, it works a little bit like YouTube. It's essentially a platform for other people to put content on, but we edit the content in terms of what goes on. In terms of the business end, people say to me, well, everywhere, in the last month I've been to Brussels, Paris, India, Los Angeles, and now Leeds. It's every single city I've been to, somebody said, is it over for magazines? How does it work for journalists, make a living? And what we basically believe is that you can still be paid to make a living, but not on sabotage, to be honest. And that, you know, we don't, from a start, I remember the first boom of the internet in the mid-90s. All the deputy editors and features editors of very successful magazines decided they were going to fuck off and start broadband companies. And they got paid a fortune to do it. And unfortunately, nobody had any access to broadband. So they were all working in this ridiculously well-paid, but ultimately dead-end situation where they were creating this content, and nobody had 3G phones, nobody had the speed of connection that the internet now has. And after about 3 years, they all ended up pretty well paid, but unemployed with large mortgages. And that was really stayed in my head. So when we started, we just said, look, we're not going to pay for the content. We'll be a platform for people's content, because had we paid for the content, it wouldn't exist now. But we also, Matt, the guy that I do it with, and I believe that there were ways to make money for ourselves and for the writers. And that was to partly use the traditional syndication model, which all newspapers use, and lots of independent syndication agencies. And they take content that's been created for one title and sell it to a variety of other titles, often in other territories around the world. So that's one element of where we get our cash from. Somebody comes in with an interview with, say, Djokovic, the tennis player. We got that at the end of last year when he was number 3 in the world. Sold it to a couple of places. When he became the Wimbledon champion, sold it to a lot more places. When he became the world number 1, sold it to even more. And that's pretty much the template, and that's one revenue stream. Another is, which the blogger Little Bird was talking about, brands are desperate to get the approval and credibility of genuinely independent voices. So they come to people like us and say, can we borrow your independent voices and pay them to no longer be independent, but appear independent? And that's really where we think that there's a lot of money, which we then funnel back into the writers, because once we've been commissioned to create content, we then go to our kind of array of writers who have contributed for free and say, right, here's some money, go away and pretend you like this, or just go away and write because you do like it. And that's probably not, now it's called content creation, it used to be called contract publishing. Lots of brands at the moment. We're working for a chocolate brand, a vodka brand, maybe a butter brand, and for some inexplicable reason, these brands want to be media owners. They want to have their own websites, whereas they used to just want to have a magazine that they put in their retail outlets. They now want to have their own websites. And the reason they want to have it is because they realise that through Facebook and Twitter, they can go direct to their audience. So instead of buying advertising space in magazines or inside the buses or at cinemas, they now know that using Twitter, they can direct people to their own magazine. So we do a lot of stuff like that. The great joy of doing Sabotage Times is, something I mentioned yesterday in the Evening Post, is that there is so much talent out there. When I first joined the NME, I sat down and there was a big pile of unopened envelopes that were dated for about 3 or 4 months prior to the date that I arrived, and nobody bothered opening them. And I opened them, and there was a guy called Stuart McConey in there, who now works on Radio 6 and BBC 2, and is a very successful journalist. There's a woman called Barbara Ellen, who's now an Observer columnist. There's a guy called Bob Stanley, who became a pop star in a little band called St Etienne. And there were numerous other very, very talented writers just sitting in those envelopes. So God knows who had been there before in the envelopes that had never ever been opened.